How's it going, people? My name is James Mitchell, and today I'm going to be showing you something that I've been doing for quite a while now. So since I started doing covers on YouTube and just trying to record myself playing, I've recorded my guitars. And the thing is, everyone has their own special way of recording, mixing, compressing, EQing, and all these sorts of things. But I would just like to share my own way of doing things. From the recording process, to the mixing, and the compressing and EQing, and all the little tricks I use to actually get the guitars sounding the way that I want them to sound. Now, I know the way that I'm going to be showing you how I record my guitars isn't always the right way or the best even. Sometimes you're going to want your own personal take on certain things, and that's entirely up to you. I'm just here to show you the way that I do it. So first things first, let's talk about guitars. Now, if you're fortunate enough to own more than one guitar, great, you've got one problem sorted. The first thing you always need to do when recording guitars is to make sure that you have two or more tones set up. For the Telecaster and the Strat, I use the same tone because both of those guitars give two of a very different sound. But the Les Paul on my left, I generally use for a lot more of the lead sort of things, and it has its own special tone. So the tone I use for the Strat and the Telecaster is a mid-boost distortion with a preamp just layered to give it a really nice sound. And with the Les Paul, I use a distortion plus, or the Boss GT1's variant of that. And then that also comes with a preamp just to, make sure that it has the right sound that I would like. And I can toggle these off and on if I want more distortion or less distortion depending on what type of song I'm doing. So there we have all the different tones out of the way, and we will come back to later why exactly all these different tones are important. Next step is what you're going to be recording with. So what I generally do is I run one side of the Boss GT1 into the amp and one side into the actual audio interface. And then the amp is mic'd up and put in an isolation booth so that the sound is as pure as it possibly can be. And from there, I record two tracks simultaneously so that I have two samples of the exact same guitar. Now, the problem comes in with phasing. Sometimes the guitar will phase ever so slightly and I have to, readjust everything. But that is one of the drawbacks of using the technique that I'm doing. And when I record the acoustic, it generally takes a straight out from the acoustic and I mic up the guitar so that I get two channels of the same guitar. From here, let's move to the computer so I can show you the EQing and compressing I would do on the guitars. Okay, so now that I've just gone and recorded all the guitars, we can actually start working on them. Alright, so first things first, we need to go and look at our samples. Are the waves the same length? As you can see here, it doesn't really look like it. So let's just zoom in a bit, get this all looking nice, and double click there. We're just gonna raise it so that's kind of equal. We don't need to do this to an exact science, and we just do that with all the different guitars. When I do this, I generally tend to raise rather than lower because it's always a lot easier to raise something than it is to lower something that's already clipping. So now that that's sorted, the next part can begin. The next part is just cropping everything to make it a little bit neater, making sure that everything is where it needs to be. Now let's actually have a listen to how this demonstration sounds. Alright, so as you can tell, it does sound very, very messy. So I have a way to fix that. First things first, let's start with some panning. We just need to adjust what you hear in the left and the right ear to make it sound quite a bit bigger than what it really is. So why it's important to have more than one guitar, more than one tone, is so that you can have something different in each ear. So for this example, I'm going to put my rhythm guitar 2 into my left ear by around 25. Then I'm going to do the exact same with my rhythm 1, except in the opposite direction. So 25 right. Now already this is going to sound quite a bit bigger. There we go. Now we can even improve on that. And to do that, generally the side that has the amp recorded, I'll leave just dead center, and you'll see why in a bit. But I pan the side that is straight all the way to the one side that I pan the entire guitar. So it creates a really wide sound. And I do this with both of the guitars. So as you can see, I haven't touched the lead guitar yet. And this is because you want to leave the lead sort of instruments in the middle. But since I have two tracks, I can just pan them a little bit left and right each. So with the amp, let's pan this maybe around 7 right and 7 left, just to give it a little bit of width. Now, next thing I'm going to do is actually show you the process of how I compress and EQ my guitars. So I have a little window here marked presets. I'll just click there and go to my basic guitar mixing. And what I do is I just drag and drop that onto wherever I'm mixing. So let's start with the lead guitar. So what I'm going to do is just solo it so that we can hear what's going on. So when I'm mixing any guitars, generally the first step I would do is with this compressor over here. And as you can see, that is jumping up and down. And what I want to do is compress that a little bit. So I just move it down. So I get a little bit of compression over there. Then from there, I have my EQ, which generally has a roll off on the highs, which is 13.5K at this point in time, and around a 90 hertz roll off at the lower end. And then generally from here, I would go and I'd find a muddy frequency using this one over here, and find a frequency I like using this one over here. And that's pretty simple to do. You generally just go with a bit of a scan. Now, a tip I would have for you when actually EQing guitars is try not to boost a frequency that sounds like, you know, a sore throat in the guitar. Generally look for something that sounds pretty high and like crunchy, especially if you're doing distorted guitars. And sometimes if you get a little bit too much of that sore throat kind of vibe I mentioned, all you can do is just take one of these and find exactly where it is and just cut it out. But make sure to raise the Q so that it's a nice clean cut. Sometimes you might want to reduce the Q just to widen it up and catch a few more frequencies in there that can be giving that sound. Then lastly, we have one more compressor, which is the glue compressor. And generally what you want is to kind of have it in between 0 and 5 by just adjusting this threshold over here. And there we go. We have one of the guitars properly EQ'd. Now you just want to repeat that process for the other two guitars. It's not too different from lead and rhythm. You just got to find what you think sounds the best. But generally you'd have different tones for your lead and your rhythm so that you can actually differentiate in sounds rather than just having everything with one guitar and one sound. So once again, I'm raising the point to make sure that you have different tones for all these things, or even different guitars entirely. Now that I've done some compressing and EQing on all of the guitars, it's going to sound a lot better. Listen to this. And there we see we have some really nice big guitar sounds that are compressed and EQ'd nicely. So now from here, we actually need to, mix and make sure that everything's at the right level. So generally what we need to do with this is make sure that the two rhythm guitars in either ear are pretty equal. So generally what I do to find this out is I right click on them together and I group them. Just rename this to rhythm guitars or RG or something along those lines. And from there you can just solo it and check if they are equal to each other. And mine sound pretty equal to each other. But also another reason why I group them is I can now lower my rhythm guitars because they do sound quite loud in comparison to the lead. So I'm just gonna lower it by maybe 5 dB. And even then, sometimes it can use a bit less volume. So you can just adjust to taste, but you don't want the rhythm guitars to be too overpowering, and also you don't want them to sit too far in the background. So there we have right about minus 8 dB for me. Seems to work the best for the rhythm guitars. But then even the lead guitar itself can use maybe a little bit of a boost. And it seems like around 1 dB should work all right there. And there we go. Now we have a nicely mixed little bit of an instrumental. But here's a little bit of a tip just in case. So as you can see, this last note here isn't exactly in line with the ending. And it can sound a bit sloppy if need be. So to fix this, what you got to do is quantize the stuff. So how do you quantize it? Well, all you have to do is you see here, you zoom into the audio file. You can double click to place a point. So I'm just going to place a point over here, another point where the note starts, and then another point over there, and just stretch. And I can do the exact same with the other one. And you can just do that to make sure everything's lined up properly, because trust me, they won't always be. Musicians sometimes they want to learn their parts and learn them well, or they just aren't that good. But I would recommend doing it only when it's really noticeable. Also, one thing I forgot to mention when quantizing is that you want to make sure that this thing that says beats is on Complex Pro, because that's going to give you the best sound when quantizing guitars. And now just to end off, as you can see, it's a very harsh cut right at the end of the guitars. So what you're going to want to do is clip that to just about the end. You don't want that harsh cut in there. And you just take this little knob here and you drag it to create a fade out. I'm just going to do that with those guitars there and just repeat the process. But if you do this, make sure the fade out for the rhythm guitars is exactly the same. Alright, now that I'm done recording, mixing and all that, let's give a listen to how this thing actually sounds. And there we go, that's another video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget, leave a like, leave a comment, and you know what, while you're at it, subscribe and hit the bell so that you know when I upload. But anyways, that's been me, James Mitchell, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.